Hello, we're here today with Professor Roberto Ordonez, and I'm calling him professor because he used to be my negotiation professor for my MBA at Central European University. So, hello, Professor, and thank you so much for accepting my invitation. Like to let you introduce yourself.
Well, thank you, Elena. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation. We're going to be talking about the thing I enjoy the most talking about, as you know. So, a little bit myself. I'm what you call a negotiation strategist. I help companies and governments with difficult negotiations, complex negotiations, and with conflict. I do a lot of conflict. And I love to teach, so I teach at multiple universities. I'm currently teaching at Georgetown, at Northwestern, teaching at HULT, at the Central European University, as you know, and it's something that's a passion of mine. I really enjoy the idea of transferring knowledge, and I've been lucky enough to have been involved in many situations, interesting ones, and I like to share what I learned.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And of course, you know that I'm fascinated by let's say, the path of your career and the journey of your career. So tell us a bit like how your career evolved over time, because I know it changed so much.
Well, it's a bit of a crazy journey, to be honest, because I'm actually an engineer, very quant kind of a person. I started as an engineer. My first master's was actually in mathematics, which was as quant as it gets, a numerical simulation. And the first years of my career were essentially doing numerical simulation at a big oil company. And in the process of what I was doing, I somehow got engaged in this negotiation the company had with the government. The people in business development needed someone that had the ability to connect to some extent and understood the logic on the underground, and that could help the business development people and the lawyers have the conversation. But I was not meant to be a part of the negotiation. I was just meant to be in the background, helping them understand what the other people were talking about in terms of the technical part, that is. And funny enough, I ended up being a part of the negotiation, and I got engaged in the negotiation and ended up being in the negotiation. And the company, they were very good at spotting talent, and they said, "Listen, Roberto, we got a lot of smart engineers, but we don't have people like you that can connect, that has the technical knowledge, but that you can actually connect that knowledge, you can connect with people." So they pulled me out of the technical teams, and they sent me off to business development, and that was it sort of started my journey more in that direction. I realized that I didn't know anything about business, so I went to business school. I went to Northwestern, to Kellogg. And after that, that was the end of the technical life. After that, I went to New York essentially to work at the only oil company that has headquarters in New York, working with the C-suite essentially doing strategy, being director of strategy worldwide. And low in New York, and then I'm from Colombia. For personal reasons, I needed to go back to my country, so I went back. I got hired by another oil company, and to do the same, to do strategy, to do planning. And I was in Colombia just minding my own business, happy to be back in Colombia. And I got a phone call very late at night from the guy that was the president of the company, and with a very short question: "Do you need a visa to go to Oman?" And it shocked me. And well, what this about? And he couldn't tell me because he was sensitive. And I said, "I need you here." And I had sort of built a career of being someone that could essentially connect the dots, fix complicated situations. So I was sent over to Oman, and after things moved in a good direction, they decided they wanted me to stay, and they say, "We would love you to stay in Oman." And I fell in love with the region. I really enjoyed the region, so I moved over to Oman. I called my wife. I said, we're moving to Oman." And she's just as crazy as I am, so she jumped on board. She was happy to do it. And we came to this part of the world, and both of us fell in love with it. When the time came to move over to the new assignment, which was American company, so it was potentially going back to the U.S. I decided that it was my time to step away and to do something on my own. So I decided to go independent, and I started the firm of what I'm doing right now, which essentially, as I said, we advise companies and governments with difficult negotiations and any industry, any geography. I just love to solve problems and help difficult situations. That's kind of my passion, and my other passion's teaching. So that's why I teach. But it's a very varied, from being super technical to being being more about people in a way. And my approach to negotiations is very people driven. It's not very transactional, as you know. It's very people driven. It's more problem solving type.
Yeah, actually, I felt that a lot when you teach the negotiation course at the CEU, because your approach was so different than what I expected, and I loved it very much, and you know that, because I think it was the only course that we had like proper assignments between each other every day, like even a few. But what I remember, and you know I like this very much from your courses, is that you always say that in a negotiations, people always leave money on the table, even if they think they won. So explain to us a bit how is this concept of leaving money on the table?
It's something that has inspired me, because the reality is that unless you really understand, negotiations are problems. They're nothing more, nothing less than problems that need a solution. But with problems, you need to really first understand the problem, and then to understand the problem, you need information, and to having that information, you need to connect with the other person. Mm-hmm. People tend to tackle negotiations more as transactions, more as battles that need to be won. It's almost like a push with your hand like this. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, you're only considering your side of the story. It's about me, and it's about my position, and it's about how can I convince the other person of, how can I show the other person the light? Mm-hmm. Because I'm right. And in reality, you are right. The problem is that you are right in your side of the story. Mm-hmm. But you're talking to someone that has a different story. And when you're going into negotiation, you say, why is this person not getting it? Why is this person so stubborn? It's not that they're being stubborn. It's not that they're not getting it. It's that whatever you're saying makes a lot of sense to you, but it doesn't make any sense to them. And whatever they're saying makes a lot of sense to them. It doesn't make sense to you. And your job as a negotiator is it's not about you. It's about understanding the other side of the story so that you can craft a solution that not only makes sense to you, that makes sense to them. Because in negotiations are about making agreements, voluntary agreements. The moment it's not voluntary, it was no longer called a negotiation. It's called litigation. You need lawyers for that. So when people have this approach that it's just about me, it's about my position, and they don't bother to understand the other side, by definition, there will be a lot of value that will never get untapped, because they will never be able to see it, to understand it. And the worst part about it is that people will walk out feeling that they did well, and when we did it in class, do you remember right at the end I said, people that are happy with people that were buyers, raise your hand, and if you're happy, keep your hands up. And everybody kept their hands up, and if you're sellers, keep your hands up. And if everybody keeps their hand up, well, something's missing, because if everybody's happy, that's great, but you're likely missed something. And then when you debrief the case, people realize how much value was left on the table, because people were so worried about sharing information, they were so worried about being taken advantage of, that everybody's talking their own game. They're not exploring. So that's the whole thing about mindset. How do you the biggest limitation in negotiation has to do with mindset. It's not this mindset that when you go into negotiation or you go into a fight, that's so limiting, and that's so pervasive. Your mindset should be about discovery. It should be about curiosity, understanding. Mm-hmm. You need to be curious, and then And the moment you do that, the other person is going to be surprised because they're not expecting you to be like that. And you open up channels, you build trust, and you overall become the kind of a person people want to negotiate with because you are, again, you're not negotiating for yourself. The other person understands you're trying to solve the problem. So listen, let me understand so I can. And then if you do it in a legit way, not to take advantage of the other party, that's one of the fastest and easiest ways, I think, to build trust, which is usually very difficult to build in negotiations.
Yeah, and I also remember when you told us that we always go to negotiations thinking that the other party wants to trick us.
Yeah.
And we have this confirmation bias that's happening because having an energy, we walk into a negotiation with an energy, with the energy that someone wants to trick us, then of course the other person, the other party is feeling that something is not okay, so then they hold back, and then we have the confirmation bias of, oh, yeah, that's something fishy here.
Absolutely. Every interaction that you have in life, in negotiations, is just human interaction in reality, human interaction with a purpose. You always start with a belief of what who the other person is. And if your original belief is that the person in front of you in a negotiation that is the enemy, well, guess what? If it's the enemy, you have to treat the other person as the enemy, which means you need to persuade that person, which means you need to potentially trick that person, maybe intimidate that person because it's the enemy. I mean, you gotta survive here, so you have to do it. And the thing is, if that's what you think, and that's how you're gonna manage it, well, the other person is gonna feel it, and is gonna react in kind. So that person is gonna also try to persuade you, is gonna try to intimidate you back because that's what they're feeling. And then that's going to be your experience. That's what you're going to experience out of the whole interaction. And then it's going to circle back and tell you, you know, I was right. This person was a difficult person. This person was the enemy. But in reality, it started with you. It started with your original belief. If you had started that whole interaction seeing the other person as your partner, we're trying to solve a problem together here, then your intention would be to understand. And that whole change in your mindset, if you want to understand, you're going to ask questions. You're trying to understand what's behind the story, and the other person is going to see it, is going to feel it, and is going to lower their guard because they see that you're trying to work something out here, and they will likely be more open. At least they will not respond aggressively to you. And then the experience that you're going to get is an experience of interaction, the experience of trust, the experience of trying to partnership, and that whole cycle changes completely, and that changes the entire dynamic of the negotiation. But it starts with you. It starts with what's your belief? Is this person my enemy or my partner? And that simple definition, that simple point is going to define where you're going.
And what you're saying makes a lot of sense, and I think that we, as a theory, we know this, but it's very hard to apply it. I think this is the difference. Like sometimes we know, oh, okay, maybe I should go into that conversation with a good mindset. But when you're there, when all the stakes are high, probably you're not going to do it. And now, related to this, I have call it a tricky question. So there's a fine line between persuasion and manipulation. How do you make sure in your negotiations that you're on the right side of it?
People tend to associate negotiation with persuasion. I mean, many times I ask students, if there's one thing you want to learn in the next, 3 days, what's it going to be? And there's quite a good chunk of people say, I want to learn to persuade better. And because people believe that negotiation is about persuading, it's about talking. And in reality, by the way, good negotiators are not good talkers. Good negotiators are good listeners. Good negotiators listen a lot more than they talk. Manipulation, let's put it this way, persuasion it's called persuasion more than manipulation. Persuasion requires and it triggers a different part of your brain that what should get triggered when you negotiate. And there's a professor I can't recall his name in Colombia that talks about this. When you negotiate, negotiation is about an exchange of assets. And or an exchange of resources, call it assets, call it money, call it time, call it idea, call it whatever. It's an exchange. Yeah. And when you are trying to exchange something, it's problem solving. The mindset that you require to solve the problem of this trade of assets or trade of resources, it's a mindset of problem solving. Mm-hmm. Yes. When you are trying to persuade someone, you're engaging a different process in your brain. Because when you're trying to persuade, you're trying to change people's minds. You're trying to change people's perceptions. You're trying to change people's ideas. In leadership, you need to persuade. If you're the CEO of a company and you're in front of your troops, you have 5,000 people in front of you, and you want to communicate your strategic plan for the next 5 years, you will try to persuade your troops that this is a good idea. That's persuasion. And you need to do it because you can't negotiate with 5,000 people. Do you think this is a good idea? Exactly. It's not a negotiation. It's about persuasion. If you're a politician, your ideas, you need to persuade people that this is a good idea. Those two are very, very different. I say you can't negotiate someone into changing, let's say, a political party. That's not a negotiation. That's persuasion. You can't negotiate someone into changing the soccer team that they pull for. That's not a negotiation. Negotiation is different, and those two are very different mental processes. And yes, you use negotiation. You use persuasion in negotiation. It is part of negotiation, but it's a very limited part. You use it when you're sitting at the table, and if you've done your job right, you're probably going to need to use a lot less of it. Because ideally, what you're putting on the table requires not as much persuasion because it makes sense to both of you. So you use it, it's part of the negotiation, but it shouldn't be your only tool, and by all means, it should never be your main tool. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, very interesting the part with the processes in the brain.
They're different. Yeah,
they're different.
Engages different processes in your brain.
And probably something in our bodies tell you so that. It's different. So then, then it's like a circle. It's very interesting. I have to research this. Mm-hmm. But related to this, because you started this conversation, which I love, and I'm more into going into neuroscience and other kind of things. But people say, you know what? I'm very rational. I'm a very rational human being. I always take decisions rationally. Tell me your opinion about this. Are we rational humans?
We like to think we're rational. We're not. Your brain, the first part of your brain that gets engaged is your emotions, and then your emotions get triggered faster than your rationale. So no, we're not. Yes, we behave rationally, and yes, we're rational in many senses, obviously. But no, we're not. We're driven by our emotions. So if you let your emotions take over, you will be triggering. Actually, you will be when your emotions get triggered in a strong way. The part of your brain that gets repeat the word that gets triggered is your limbic brain, your flight system, and that's your smaller brain. So that's the brain that needs to cut through information very quickly because you need to survive. You have a tiger in front of you. So you can't be too rational about it. You just need to run or defend yourself. And that is through evolution. That's how our brains are coded because, well, when we were in the caves, you had a tiger and you needed to react. Our brains are still in that area. Our brains are still in the caves. They don't know we are in the time of we are. So your natural processes will trigger that if you let them. So
how do you make sure?
You need to. Emotions are something that you need. You can't really control your emotions. I mean, you should be able to, but you just need to be aware of your emotions. The moment you label your emotions, nothing wrong with emotions, by the way.
Of course.
If you have emotions, well, congratulations, you're human,
You're human.
basically. The problem is never the emotion. Actually, emotions are important. Emotions are triggers, alarm systems that tell you how you feel, what you should be careful of. Emotion tells you, listen, you're getting upset, you should be careful. Emotions tells you, listen, there's a need that is not being met, you should be. The problem with emotions is not the emotion itself. The problem with emotions is letting the emotion control you. So you need, yes, we're emotional. We need to acknowledge that we are. Don't try to pretend that we're not and hide the emotions. You just need to learn to be aware of the emotions so that you can manage the emotion. Not necessarily control it, but you can manage it. And don't let the emotion control you.
Yeah. It's a very good word that I want to stop you a bit because it's a very good word what you said. It's managing.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking a lot about this. So you control your emotions. You're not impulsive, you control your emotions, but the way you make decisions, the emotion is still there, even if you control it. So if you piss me off now, I can control it, right? I won't scream at you, I won't say anything, but I would still have it. And my decision of meeting with you the next time would be based on the emotions that I have. So how do you make sure, like self-awareness?
Emotions are like thunderstorms. You just need to wait. You need to let them pass. If the emotion gets to a point where you don't think you can manage it, let alone control it, take a break. Go for a walk. In negotiations, you take a lot of breaks, by the way. Negotiations are not endurance exercises. You should take breaks and you should clear your head many times. So if you can't, we're emotional, and the situation might put you in a place where emotions will rise and it'll start taking over you. Take a break, because at that moment, you're no longer thinking with your frontal lobe, you're thinking with your limbic brain. So you are not smart. And you're going to be making bad decisions, and you'll be going to be saying things you will regret. And being aware of the emotion, which is, as I said, just be aware where you are, allows you to say, hold on, we need to take a break, basically. You can't, there's some things that you simply, you can't manage it. At a certain level of emotion, you just can't manage it.
But those emotions, of course, you manage them and you control them and you take a break. But afterwards, how impactful are those emotions that you already controlled it and managed, again, in your decision-making process?
Well, it depends where your emotion is when you make the decision. If you made the decision when your emotion was at the red level, well, you're likely going to be making a bad decision. If you allow yourself to maneuver through the emotion and either come back to the room and do it later, or take some time off, do it alone, and then come back, you're likely to be able to engage a more rational piece of your brain. But it's not that we're not rational; we're obviously rational. But the first part, that the first responders of our brain is not a rational. It's not a rational triggers. It's our emotional triggers. And people that think they're too rational, they're tricking themselves, because all they're doing is building up the emotions, and emotions are like pipes. If you pressure them up, eventually they'll start to leak. And when they leak, it's a ticking bomb. Basically, it'll leak, and for sure it's going to leak, and your voice is going to start getting faster. Your respiration is going to start getting shorter, because you're getting ready to run from a tiger.
I can totally imagine myself doing that.
It's a tiger in front of you. You need to run. But that's your brain is there. Your brain is not here.
Thank you so much. Again, I want to go a bit from emotions to a question about maybe a very emotional or a negotiation that went haywire in your career. And what did you learn from that?
Well, negotiations usually never go as planned. It's like Mike Tyson has this expression that's, everybody has a plan until they get hit on the face. Negotiations, you need to be flexible. you go with a plan. You need to plan. I mean, good negotiators prepare. That's a large part of
I know.
success.
I did my homework.
Like 70% of according to some universities. But preparing doesn't mean you in the plan it's set in stone. It means you're ready for eventual. You're ready for multiple scenarios, and very likely your first approach is likely to go in many situations. You'll find obstacles that you did not discover. Negotiations is a discovery process. The key is to be able to maneuver, to be able to be flexible. And also many times in negotiations, sometimes the best answer to negotiation is just don't negotiate. And that's the thing that a lot of people think, I have to negotiate. And sometimes the best possible outcome was actually to say no.
And how do you get there? Like, how does the setup has to look like in order for a negotiation to have the best outcome? We don't negotiate.
It's all about preparation. You need to, you never go into negotiation, and we talked about this in class, and if you don't have a plan B and a plan C, for the love of God, do not go into a negotiation, because you have no power. You're essentially at the mercy of the other party. So good preparation allows you to be flexible. Good preparation allows you to, okay, hit this obstacle, okay, let's retreat, let's understand. It's always you're trying to discover how the problem is. This part we didn't know. Now we need to do some problem solving and go. I would say, I like to think that all the negotiations I've been involved in, we have managed to reach to a safe shore. But many of them, those we had to take very different paths that we started with. And success in a negotiation, is not necessarily this is a plan that I executed it to perfection. No, it's success in a negotiation is being flexible, maintaining your goal, maintain your what are your interests, what is your desired outcome, and constantly maneuver until you get to reach that path, and also make sure that the other person actually does get to their path as well, because a good negotiation doesn't end when you sign the contract. And this is this mentality that I did a great deal, and good negotiations need to be sustainable. Good negotiations need to be implementable. And good negotiations ideally should strengthen relationships. If you literally took advantage of the other party, you made them sign, well, good luck with implementation. Good luck with your relationship. Things will happen in life. I mean, this contract is for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Things will happen. Things, like I said, shit will happen. I'm sorry for my French. And if you did not consider those things when you did your original contract, if your contract is so inflexible that when these things happen, you can't maneuver around it, or if the contract is too inflexible, but at least the relationship is strong, you can maneuver. If not, you essentially in 5 years you're gonna be calling me to come and fix it.
Yeah.
And that's not the idea. The idea is not that you need to get someone like me on a parachute to get you out of trouble because you signed the wrong contract, because you did not consider what could have happened.
What you're saying right now is actually very interesting, because since we had the class with you, I found myself in a lot of situations, not necessarily, maybe people when they think negotiations, they think, I don't know, salary negotiations or contract negotiations or money related, but I think it's not only that. So there are different kinds of negotiations that we do, a lot of us daily. And what I've noticed is that exactly what you said, when you leave the table thinking that you tricked someone, or I convinced it, I won, that's going to come back and bite you very hard. And if you don't make sure, if you have no other choice but to do that, you have to always make sure you have a strong relationship with that person, and that you can explain and can have more opportunities in the future to fix it. Because if you don't do these things, there's no way in hell that you won. So I literally saw a lot of these, not only with me but also with the people around me. So I started to see a world in a more of a negotiations kind of world. But what's interesting, and I want to actually get to this point. Warren Buffett has a quote, or you cannot make a deal with a bad person. Like, my question is, does it someone like a bad person exist? Or I mean, I don't think that we're split in good and bad. But what does a bad person mean in the negotiations world?
Well, there's bad people around, unfortunately. Yeah, there's all kinds of people. I would think is with a bad person, with a person that you'll be able to make a deal, but it's likely it might not be the best deal, because to make a good deal it's a tango. You need two parties to play. So with people that are, like people say, I often say a negotiation with two parties, I said to the client, listen, let me also train the other party. And it's like, you're crazy. Why would I train my counterpart? Because your counterpart is not the enemy. You're trying to solve a problem together. It's actually easier to negotiate with good negotiators, because good negotiators understand exchanging information. Good negotiators understand long term. Good negotiators understand that this is how you're trying to add value.
And we were talking about bad negotiators and good negotiators. And I will interrupt the professor because I always interrupt people. I'm sorry for that. Because how do you, in the context of good and bad negotiators, in a world where everyone wants to win, like everyone wants to be a winner.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be a loser. And winning means different things for different people.
That's the thing.
Yeah. You know what I want to ask you, so go on. Yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, we all want to win, and you should win, because if you don't win, then you're going to be regretted, and you're going to essentially be the party that is always going to be looking for revenge because you didn't do your job. There's the win, there's win-win, I mean, win-win doesn't necessarily mean that you compromise with the other party. Win-win, if you left the negotiation and you're the only one that won, you didn't win. Essentially, I mean, any negotiation that's an important negotiation, would be with someone that you would continue to interact, and it will be a long-term negotiation. And if you won it's like you won the battle, but you totally lost the war, because they say revenge is a play that is best served cold. If you take advantage of someone, that person will hold a grudge, and believe me, that person will hold it. And whenever there's a chance to get even, the person will get even, and that would mean they slow down the implementation. They'll be super passive aggressive, and they'll try to get you back in one way or another. And the value that you would be losing will be far outweighed any potential gains that you thought you made by squeezing the other person's, drawing the last bit of blood. Good negotiations are, you have an objective that you're trying to meet, you understand the objective of the other party, and you're trying to reach a place where both of you walk out and say, I got what and it's possible. This is where we talk that negotiations, you need to be creative. There's like multiple ways to get to Rome. And the challenge of the negotiator is to not just look for getting what you want, but understanding, and I go back to the thing about problem solving, is understanding the problem and building a solution, a creative solution that makes sense to both parties. Otherwise, it will not be a good negotiation. It will essentially be something that looks great on paper, but that implementation is bad, or a nightmare, and a relationship that will only get you'll be fighting for the next 10 years. So that's not a good negotiation. And that's this mindset and that's the value that you leave on the table, plus, basically.
By the way, because you said you need to understand the other people's problem, you need to focus on creating a relationship with those people, with the other party. How do you feel it now after COVID that we started talking more and more on Zoom and or different platforms. And how do you think that the evolution of tech and AI will affect negotiations?
Yeah, it's difficult to tell what's going to happen, but for sure it will impact it. I mean, COVID put us all in behind Zoom screens, and negotiation. I mean, human communication is just not just verbal. Yeah, human communication is very. You speak with your whole body, and non-verbal communication is actually a huge percentage of 70+% of actually. If you put non-verbal and tone of voice and all that, your words are less than 10% of the actual communication. So if you take all that out, then you're actually taking a lot of the information that you can get from the other party. And during those times, I remember you had the cameras and some people would turn off the cameras. I was saying, listen, this is like me trying to land a Cessna on a thunderstorm, high winds, and I'm trying to land this Cessna. The runway goes like that, and you literally took off my controls. You can't navigate that way. So yes, I mean we need to. I mean that's the new norm. So we need to learn to get as much information as you can from the what you get from here up. But yeah, it affects it. I don't think it's ideal, but it's reality. So you need to learn to navigate that new space. Now going forward, AI is a completely new game. I mean AI will do things like they will be able to read your face, they will be able to read my face, and eventually you have some glasses here that will be reading your expression, will telling you Elena is upset, Elena is telling you is lying to you, based on your pupils or what you do with your arms, and it's going to affect the way you think, because in reality, just because you cross like arms like that doesn't mean that you're hiding something. It might just mean that you're tired. But the AI will be making its own judgments about how it's going to interpret your body movement, and it's going to influence how you negotiate. AI will also at some point start negotiating on your behalf, and I'm not sure I want AI yet to be taking on that role. But yeah, it's going to change. I'm not sure in what direction, but by all means, it will impact the way we interact and the way we negotiate. And you'll have a lot more information as well from about the other party.
Changing, because we were talking before the podcast, changing the game. So AI is changing the game. So what can you tell us about the concept of changing the game in negotiations?
AI it's a game changer. No, but the thing we were talking about changing the game, we were thinking about sometimes you run into negotiations where the other party simply cannot say yes. Because the way the setup is laid out, the cost, or let alone the cost, the pain of that person saying yes to you is just far, far greater than the benefit of it's far. Saying no and maintaining status quo is just far. The balance is like this.
Okay.
And in situations like that, you literally, there's nothing you can. I don't care how charming you are. You're not going to be able to get that person to say yes, because literally the situation is laid up in a way that the pain is just too much. You
So
can't.
what do you do?
You have to literally change the game. You have to change the conditions of the game, so that to make it easy to essentially change that balance, so that the pain of saying no. And you do this through building a coalition, or they do this a lot in geopolitics. Sometimes countries simply cannot say no because the status quo is just better. And with that person, you're not going to get that person to change their mind, because it's just doesn't make sense to them. They're right. I mean, it does not. The status quo is just much better. So the only thing you can do is you need to engage the outside, the community, the third parties, build alliances, and change the whole setup of the game, so that the person now, the cost of saying no, because the whole environment changed, now it's, maybe you still want to say no, but now saying no is more expensive and more painful than saying yes. And it's going to be potentially a regret, a yes that you'll say with your teeth grinding, but you change the conditions of the game. You change the whole environment, because just between the two of you, you simply cannot do it. You need to involve, and you change the conditions of the way the game is played. And you do that a lot in geopolitics, and you need to do it also in a lot of transactional negotiations. So it takes time, by the way. It's not you can do it.
It's super long term, right?
Not super long term, but it's not the sort of thing you can change in a day or in a week. You need to
be super creative in the same time.
You need to build coalitions,
Yes.
Understand who influences who, and how
see
do
the whole ecosystem around it.
You need to engage the whole ecosystem, because you need to change the whole context so that the situation is different for that party too. The status quo is no longer sustainable because, well, the world around the whole context changed.
Wow. That's very powerful. And what you're saying right now, it got me thinking. I was talking to someone at one point, and she told me, I think that we make decisions based on our greatest fear. Mm-hmm. So if the fear of doing X thing is bigger than losing that, I'm going to do that. When the fear changes, when the balance of the fears changes, then you're ready to make that step.
Fear is more powerful than gain, and that's why marketers use it a lot. That's why you get last day. You go into hotels.com and you say 3 rooms left at this rate, because people have this. People fear losing. Mm-hmm. Fear is very powerful, and we weight a lot more the cost of losing something than the cost of gaining something.
Exactly.
So marketers and neuroscience plays a lot of games with the perception of fear. And when you frame a negotiation, sometimes you need to frame it in a way that you engage not the fear, but if you don't do this now, you're gonna lose something.
Mm-hmm. Emphasize the
perception of loss is very powerful. Mm-hmm. It's like that's why people say to you, take or leave it. Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, I don't believe in that, but that's what they're trying to do. There's this in disputes, for example. You're going into a dispute and you're trying to, you're going back and forth, and you go and say, now we have an agreement. We just need to work out these points, and we have an agreement. And it's like, and they do it with group number 1 and group number 2. And one group, they tell them, we're ready to sign. We just need to agree these final small points, and we have a deal. Mm-hmm. And usually it deadlocks. They never reach a deal. And they change the way it's phrased, and they say, listen, guys, we have a deal. All we need to do is just finalize these 3 small points. And people close the deals. Because when you have a deal, now you have something that you're going to lose. And then that fear of losing allows them to close these points. Before, well, they didn't have a deal, so there was nothing to lose. And they get tangled and deadlocked on those points. So it's how you frame mm-hmm. situations make a big difference on people's, and that's pure neuroscience. That's how our brains are coded, and we have lots of biases in our brain, and that's also the non-rational part. All these biases are simply not rational; they are subconscious, mm-hmm. and you can't control them. I mean, they are literally subconscious, and that's why marketers use them a lot to in this way, literally to trick you into doing this or that.
It's also related with the concept of, if I have $10 million and I keep 9 million, I'll give you 1. You won't take it because, like, what's the thing behind it?
That's more the concept of fairness. Fairness is very, very important in negotiation. I mean, you can have something that is good for you, that is better than your alternatives, it makes sense. But if you have this feeling that you're not being treated fairly, you still are likely to say no, because people need fairness, and that's the whole point why a lot of negotiations end up somewhere in the middle, because it feels fair. Fairness is very important. So the thing with the $100 bill is, you give 100 and you say, you choose how you split it, and however you choose it, if you come to an agreement, you split it. If you don't, you give me the 100 back. And if a person says, I take 99 and I give you one, the logical part for that person, well, before that exercise, that person had nothing. So
exactly.
one makes sense. Why not? I mean, he had nothing. Why? But that person will say no, because it's just not fair. And then the split, if it's 50-50 or 60-40 or 70-30 or even 90-10, depends on the size of the bill. Because if it's 100, it's a 199. But if you say, well, here's a $10 million,
Exactly.
well, 10% of the million is still $1 million, so you might. So it depends on the scale, but the concept remains. It needs to feel fair, otherwise you will say no.
Fairness is a very
Fairness is
thing.
important.
Yeah, very important. Thank you so much for this discussion. I could stay a few hours more, but I want us to close this interview and leave the people who are listening to Mind My Business podcast, which is, by the way, called Mind My Business, because you said it during the interview, for people who mind their businesses. What would you leave them with? Like let's say three skills that someone that wants to learn negotiations should tackle first.
Listen. I mean, like I said, good negotiators listen. Understand that whatever it's your position, that's just your story. There's more stories. The person or the multiple stakeholders that you have in front, each one of them have their own stories, and your job is to understand those stories. It's never about you. Negotiations it's about making agreements, voluntary agreements, and you need that. And the third one would be having to do with emotions. Remember that you're an emotional human being, that you can't be friends with your emotions. Don't try to hide your emotions. I'm not saying going to a negotiation is going to start crying. That's not what I'm saying. But you have emotions. We are human beings, and human beings, we have learn to value your emotions, learn to use your emotions, learn to manage your emotions. They will be there, whether you like it or not. It's up to you whether you want to engage with them and manage them, or you want to ignore them. And I'm sorry to tell you, they will not let you ignore them. They will eventually get to you. And when they get to you, it's because the pressure is just so great that, boom. So be aware. I mean, that's you do have emotions. Yes, you're rational, but that's not all you are. Before you trigger your rationale, your emotions were triggered before. Split seconds, but they're before, and they alter the course of the whole interaction.
Thank you so much. But one more question. Like an environment, what would be an environment favorable for people to practice the skills, like every day, so they can get better? Because of course, getting better in negotiations is doing more negotiations, practicing. So what would be, like, for people who are not involved in negotiations very often, what would be that safe environment where they can practice?
Well, the whole thing with negotiations, so you're negotiating all the time, right?
Yes.
Negotiation, and this is the thing, negotiations are not transactions. That's just one type of negotiation. You're negotiating, I mean, where do you go with friends for dinner? It's a negotiation. I mean, and it's, if you want to go somewhere and everybody wants to go somewhere else, it's engaging. Why do you want to go there? And trying to, and like we had this exercise in class about my wife and I deciding where to go on vacations, and we could have radically different points of view. But if you understand why and why, there's common ground that you can find. So it's using. I mean, negotiations is just human interaction. You're doing it all the time.
But
So
I think we're not so aware of that we were doing negotiations
you're doing it all the
all
time.
the time. Yeah.
So all these things that I'm telling you, try to understand the other side of the story, try ask questions, be curious. I mean, you want to do this, I want to do this. Why? Why do you want to do that? Let me understand. It's actually the idea. There's no money on the table, so you can. It's easier to do it in those situations. If you're kids, well, kids are irrational negotiators, so it's a good space to practice conflict. Because well, guess what? You can't fire them. You can't put them. You can't threaten them to put them up for adoption. So I don't have kids myself, but yeah, it's if you have kids, that's actually a good environment to practice conflict resolution. You want to negotiate with irrational people. Well, your kids are one of those. So there's lots of. The whole point is always try to understand what the other side is. It's going and saying, if the other person says no, the trigger in your head should be, there's something I don't know, because something I'm missing. If you think you know it all, I'm sorry, but you're delusional.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for so many great insights, and hope to see you soon again.
Well, thank you for the invite. It's great seeing you.
Same here.